Well, hello everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I know we have a few more that are joining, but for the sake of time, we will begin. So, to introduce myself, my name is Emily Hegg, and I serve as the Associate Director of Campus Wellbeing here in Student Health Service. And I have the great pleasure of working with our health promotion team. And as excuse me, on behalf of the health promotion team, I welcome all of you to our Think session here today. We are going to be focusing on hidden disabilities and excuse me, I'm looking at my notes here and I'm totally messing this up. So we will be recording the session. I have the recording going on right now. And as we begin, I want to first recognize our land acknowledgement. So I will go ahead and read that to you all now. So we collectively acknowledge that we gather at NDSU, a land-grant institution on the traditional lands of the Oceti-Sakowee, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Anishinaabe peoples, in addition to many diverse Indigenous peoples still connected to these lands. We honor with gratitude Mother Earth and the Indigenous peoples who have walked with her throughout generations. We continue to learn how to live in unity with Mother Earth and build strong, mutually beneficial, trusting relationships with Indigenous peoples of our region. So thank you all for joining. We have co-presenters here today for our session. So today we have Mark Coppin, who serves as the Director of the Center for Accessibility and Disability Resources here at NDSU. We also will have Betsy Carter joining us in presenting. Betsy serves as the Assistant Director and Coordinator of Clinical Services and is a mental health counselor at the NDSU Counseling Center. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on over to Mark, who will be sharing his screen and walking through the PowerPoint today. Thank you, Mark.
All right, thank you. All right, I'll just get this up here real quick and we'll get moving. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is hidden disabilities and hidden disabilities at NDSU. Now, the presentation, we do focus on students. However, we also have to acknowledge that we have faculty and staff who are also have hidden disabilities. And a lot of the, we start talking about the misconceptions and kind of the struggles that our students will have who have hidden disabilities. We wanted to acknowledge that faculty and staff also have those, and we're fully aware of that in our office because we deal with some of the faculty who are struggling with that, and we try to make accommodations or supports for them when we roll out our accommodations to make sure that we allow time for them to be able to make those accommodations, provide those accommodations for those students. So we'll just real quickly, again, my name is Mark Coppin. I'm the Director for the Center for Accessibility and Disability Resources here at NDSU, and co-presenting is Betsy Carter, and she's the Assistant Director and Coordinator of Clinical Services and Mental Health Counselor at NDSU. So Betsy and I have worked together since I've been here, and she's done various different projects, capacities, and one of the projects that we did for the PCCW is to kind of acknowledge that that hidden disabilities or invisible disabilities is a pretty significant issue at NDSU. And especially coming out of COVID, we saw a lot of students and faculty who are really struggling, and staff who are really struggling. And we want to make sure that there's an awareness of that. So what we did is we put together an awareness campaign, and this is the kickoff to that awareness campaign, to make people aware of invisible disabilities or hidden disabilities, from the perspective of students that don't feel that they can get services at NDSU for their hidden disabilities, but also an awareness for faculty and staff who are working with these students of what some of the struggles those students are and what are some of the solutions that they can come up with to accommodate those students, whether they're diagnosed or identified or not within their classrooms. So when we talk about hidden disabilities, you may hear many different terms for hidden disabilities. You could hear hidden disability, invisible disability, or kind of the new term that is being used is non-apparent disability. And again, these terminologies may change. They still focus on that it is a disability that is not visible, is not something that is apparent. So when we talk about a hidden disability or an invisible disability, it's a physical, mental, or neurological condition that is not immediately apparent to others, but significantly impacts a person's life. So is it one or more of their life functions is affected, and they have a diagnosis of a disability or a hidden disability. So some of the examples are, we talked to look at chronic illnesses. When we talk about chronic illnesses, it could be stuff like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, diabetes, or autoimmune disorders. When we talk about mental health conditions, those mental health conditions could be depression, anxiety, OCD, PTSD, or bipolar. It can also be neurological disorders. And we talk about neurological disorders, we talk about students who have dyslexia, or adults, not only just students, but faculty and staff also, dyslexia, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, or chronic migraines. Chronic pain. Chronic pain conditions can be stuff like back injuries, arthritis, certain types of nerve damage. Again, there are a lot of different people that are struggling with various chronic pains and conditions. Auditory or visual impairments. Again, when we talk about that, it could be partial blindness, partial deafness, or deafness, which is not apparent. Cardiovascular or respiratory conditions. We're talking about conditions like heart disease, congestive heart failure, AFib, or asthma. These things can affect a person on how they are functioning and how they are able to perform. Gastrointestinal disorders, disorders like irritable bowel syndrome, or food allergies. We have a lot of students who have various different food allergies or different types of allergies that really affect their day-to-day functioning, and affects their energy levels. It can affect many different aspects of their life. And the last one is autoimmune deficiencies like lupus, HIV/AIDS, or maybe they're getting cancer, and they're getting cancer treatment. So again, their autoimmune system is compromised at that point. So those are several different examples of various different disabilities that we may see. But a hidden disability is often referred to as an invisible disability because it may not have an obvious physical sign or require mobility aids like a wheelchair or a cane. It is not something when a student is in a classroom where you can take a look and there are those obvious signs. I don't know, there's a walking cane. There might be a cane for a blind person or someone that's in a wheelchair. So it's they are functioning and they are like every other student in the class, or appear like every other student in the class, but they are suffering, or not suffering, but they have a disability that really limits what they can do or what they have access to in that classroom. But these conditions can really cause significant challenges to a person's in their day-to-day life. So I'm going to show a video. This is a video that University Relations has put together that talks about the hidden disabilities on campus. It's a very short video, but it's actually launched today, and we'll talk about a website in a little bit.
My name is Seth Arvla. I am part of the Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science program, and I am a senior this year.
My name is Emily. I am a psychology major, and I am in my second year at NDSU.
I'm S.J. Williamson. This is my third year in the PhD Rhetoric and Culture program at NDSU. Mentally, I have PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder, and recurring depressive episodes. My brain doesn't really work as other people's brains. I also have IBS and colitis, and it interacts with my anxiety, so if one's bad, the other one tends to also be bad.
I struggle with a hearing loss in a single ear, and that makes situations difficult when there's things like static in the room or extra noise, and just locating sounds?
So my hidden disability is autism. I have a lot of trouble with sensory things. Things like bright lights and loud sounds can really ruin my day, and communication can be a little difficult.
These are disabilities that when you look at a person, it's not apparent. You won't see somebody in a wheelchair, or it may not be someone carrying a cane. It's just not an apparent disability that they just look like everybody else. There are a lot of different resources that are available at NDSU. So our department, when a student comes in and they register with us, we kind of look at what are the barriers that they're facing in their day-to-day lives in the classroom, and we try to find those accommodations that will help them have equal access to that curriculum and give them the tools to be able to be successful in their classroom activities and academic-wise.
When I first got to NDSU, one of my first stops was at the Center for Accessibility and Disability Resources. Talking to people there could give me accommodations that would help me be successful.
NDSU has done a phenomenal job of setting up their students for success with programs like the Center for Accessibility and Disability Resources, with things like checking out equipment, creating different environments that are specific for each student and helps them through their challenges.
There's no level of disability you have to have in order to get accommodations. You deserve to be comfortable and safe, and you deserve to use what makes you do your best.
I like what she said, that there's no level of disability, and there's no, because we hear that a lot with some of our students that come in. They're just saying, I don't think it's enough for me to get services for this. I mean, and there are many different reasons for that, and we'll kind of talk about some of those misconceptions in a little bit. But the next several slides are, I wanted to kind of let you know there are some very famous people who have hidden disabilities who are struggling, that when we see them, it's not apparent, and they've kind of overcome that. Tom Cruise has dyslexia, and he struggles with reading and writing from very early on. And so he's developed these compensatory skills where he visualizes everything that he needs to do when he goes through a script. And so he has these compensatory skills there. He's able to overcome that. Justin Timberlake, he has ADHD, hyperactivity disorder, and he's also has obsessive compulsive disorder. So when you see that he struggles with that on a daily basis, so he again, you can kind of see that in some of his work and some of the things that he does, where he kind of uses those what we call a disability, but to his advantage, to be very organized and has control of that. Michael Phelps, he was diagnosed with ADHD as a child, and just not too long ago, he also had struggles with depression. Again, and we look at this very highly successful champion swimmer, Olympic swimmer, and but he also struggled with depression, especially after he got out of Olympic swimming. Lady Gaga has fibromyalgia, which causes her chronic pain and fatigue. And you look at her performing, you would never know that. Adele struggles with anxiety and panic attacks, even while performing on stage. And we watch Adele perform on stage and sing, and it's amazing. And she struggles with anxiety that she can't perform, and that she is not going to be able to perform and do what she needs to do and make everybody happy. And she also struggled again after she had a divorce, which exacerbated her anxiety and her panic attacks. Ryan Reynolds, he has lifelong struggles with anxiety and uses medication and exercise to cope with his hidden disability. And Prince was diagnosed with epilepsy as a child. He would experience seizures and was believed to be photosensitive. And you look at what Prince did and his performances and his shows, and what he had to overcome, you would never have guessed that he had this hidden disability. So there are a lot of challenges and myths when we start talking about hidden disabilities. And one of them is the lack of understanding from others. So since their disability is not visible, people may not believe that they have a real medical condition or a mental condition, or they judge their abilities or make incorrect assumptions about what their needs are. There's a feeling of isolation. They may feel alone in their experience, as if others don't understand their challenges. They have a need to repeatedly explain their disability. They often have to educate others about their conditions and advocate for their needs. And this can be really exhausting or tiring for these students. There's accusations of faking. Some people assume that these students or persons with these hidden disabilities are exaggerating or faking their disability, since there is no obvious sign. And that can be very frustrating and challenging and hurtful for these students. And we've seen that at NDSU, where faculty don't understand that student may be struggling, especially when we roll out some of our accommodations. There's the assumption that the student is faking to get a better grade or get an advantage that other students that don't have. And then there's also, they feel there's a judgment for using their accommodations. They feel that if they use their accommodations, like handicap parking or seating, or they'll get dirty looks or rude comments from people who don't think they look disabled. And this happens a lot for persons who have various mental conditions or chronic pain conditions who need to have a handicap parking spot. But it appears, and they get out of their car, that they're fine, and they get challenged on that. But people don't know what struggling they're going through. And I think that's one of the things that we always need to keep cognizant of and in the back of our mind, that people are struggling with things that we don't know about, and we can't always make an assumption about what they're struggling with or what their disability is. Other is that it's difficult to get accommodations. This is one of those myths. Since their disability is invisible, they may have to provide documentation to get workplace or school accommodations. And that process also can be draining, but it is one of the hurdles that they need to go through, that sometimes they just feel it's too much and they don't try to get those accommodations. But we always encourage students to, get your documentation to us, we really go by self-reporting as kind of the main way to figure out what barriers a student has. And we look at that documentation to support what they're saying. So that documentation really is secondary. Not that it always goes that way, but it should. Flare-ups and variability of symptoms. Symptoms can come and go with various different medical health conditions, even mental conditions. But they may see the student on their good day and they don't see them on their bad days, or it's not apparent that they're having a bad day. So it doesn't look like it's that these flare-ups are happening, but it happens all the time. So again, we talk about, we have students who have migraines, and those migraines will flare up. It's not apparent when they're in the classroom, but recovering from a migraine is very debilitating to some of our students and our faculty and staff. Fatigue from trying to be normal or pure normal. It takes a lot of effort to hide some of the symptoms for some of the students, or they pretend to feel well when they don't, to cover it up. But it's also exhausting for them to do that. Stress about disclosing their disability. They have to decide whether to tell others or when to tell others, which is also stressful, and they risk that stigma. And I think in the upper Midwest, I think that is even more challenging. I think there is that attitude that you're going to tough it out, you're going to figure it out yourself, and you're not going to rely on resources that are there. So they struggle in silence. And we see that a lot where students they think that they can do it, and they get to the midterm and all of a sudden they're failing, and they come to us and say, we really need help. I need help. So again, it is very exhausting for them. And they also, it's the imposter, feeling like an imposter or imposter syndrome. They may doubt themselves when their illness or whether it's chronic or symptoms vary day to day. They say, well, maybe it's not so bad today. Maybe it's, it'll go away. But they feel like they feel like an imposter at times. Accommodations are one size fits all. This is a misconception that we hear all the time. Students, accommodations are there for our students. That's what we do. We go through that interactive process with our students, and accommodations are not a one size fits all. They're very individualized. They're very individualized to the specific student and to that disability that they're struggling with. Next one is that hidden disabilities are temporary or can be easily overcome. Most hidden disabilities are not temporary, and they're not easy to overcome. It's a lifelong thing. And these students and adults will develop those compensatory skills to be able to overcome them. Disclosing a hidden disability is unnecessary. Most students really fear, I shouldn't say most. Some students may fear disclosing their hidden disability due to concerns about the stigma or discrimination. However, disclosure is often necessary for them to be able to access services and accommodations. Coming to the Center for Accessibility or going to the counseling center to get some help, that's what we're here for. But it really is that they don't feel that it's necessary, and it really is. The other one is all hidden disabilities are the same. There's a misconception that hidden disabilities are kind of this homogeneous category. But in truth, hidden disabilities encompass a whole wide range of conditions, including mental health, learning disabilities, chronic illnesses, and more. And each condition is kind of unique and has unique characteristics and impacts a student differently. Even with the same type of a disability, every student is different. I worked for years and years in the field where I dealt with students on the autism spectrum. And one of the sayings that we came across all the time is, if you know a student who has autism, you know one student that has autism, because they're all different and there's different aspects of that. If you can't see it, it's not a real disability. Again, one of the most prevalent misconceptions is the belief that disabilities must be visible, and that's not true. The next one is students with hidden disabilities are seeking special treatment. Some may mistakenly believe that students are looking to get special treatment, but really what we're trying to do, or the unfair advantage, we hear that all the time. Getting extra time on an exam is unfair advantage for these students. But in reality, accommodations are provided to ensure that the student has equal access to their education, but not to confer any special privileges. Students who have anxiety and stress, we hear all the time, everyone experiences stress and challenges in college. Well, that's true. College is a very stressful time and challenging for many of our students. But those with hidden disabilities really face unique obstacles that go well beyond academic stress. That the level of support they require really is based on their documented needs, but it's not an attempt to avoid challenges. Students with hidden disabilities are not capable academically. And again, there may be that misconception that students with hidden disabilities are not academically capable as their peers. In reality, these students with hidden disabilities excel a lot of times academically when they're provided with the appropriate accommodations and supports. It really is giving them equal access and leveling that playing field so they can perform and participate in their classrooms as any other student and show what they do know. Oops, I think I missed one. Nope. All right, with that, I'm going to turn that over to Betsy and I will mute my mic.
Okay, and Mark, if you can still be my slide mover a header, that would be great because I don't think I have access to do that. But just when I get done with this slide, if you can do that.
Absolutely.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I'm here to talk about kind of those negative attitudes and kind of go beyond a bit what Mark had said about some of those myths and misconceptions, especially when we're in the classroom with students. Being a counselor at the counseling center, it gives me a really unique place to be, to kind of walk with students at our university weekly, bi-weekly, for sometimes a couple of years, to hear how their invisible disability affects them and how people act towards them. And I'm somebody with an invisible disability myself too, so I just have a lot of empathy there. So I think I can talk pretty well about these different areas and some of those negative attitudes that come up. So the first one being kind of that lack of awareness. So, sometimes we might just lack awareness about how hidden disabilities impact our students' learning. Sometimes faculty or staff, like Mark was saying, might see those accommodations as either laziness or excuse making, or just really misunderstanding the limitations that those students are facing. Faculty members or staff members might also be hesitant to provide those accommodations as well, due to concerns about like how fair it would be to other students, or concerns about the workload, or sometimes just even a lack of what they feel is institutional support. Again, they might view those accommodations as unfair to other students, and that definitely creates tension with both the faculty or staff member, as well as with the student as well. Both ends of that feel it. Also just thinking about situations of prejudice or stereotyping. Sometimes faculty or staff might also hold negative stereotypes about people with disabilities, and they might view them as less capable or even less deserving of academic success. And of course, that can lead to a lot of discriminatory behavior and exacerbate those feelings of exclusion for students that are experiencing the hidden disabilities. In my experience working with students on this end too, is by and large, a lot of the students that are going through these things are some of the grittiest students that I've had the pleasure of meeting, where they're dealing with maybe a chronic illness, chronic mental health issues, and doing so in a way that other people can't necessarily see, like we've been talking about, as well as trying to really strive to be very academically successful. And so I look at the work that they're doing, and it can sometimes they're doubling down on work in comparison to other students. And so I think there's a lot to be kind of learned from those students and their grittiness. If you can advance me, Mark. Awesome. So again, faculty members or staff members could have a limited knowledge of specific hidden disabilities. And so that's kind of why we're wanting to do this campaign, so we can kind of diminish maybe some of those misconceptions or stereotyping. We want to create a more supportive and more inclusive environment for these students to be successful at our university. Thinking about stigmatization as well too, it might influence just our attitudes looking at these students. Again, looking at the students through a lens of those stereotypes, rather than looking at what that student brings to the classroom and their unique strengths that they bring as well. Thinking about the lack of legitimacy. Some faculty and staff may also hold the perception that they're not as legitimate, those hidden disabilities, as ones that we can see, the visible disabilities. And again, that can affect how those academic accommodations are perceived and also given in an academic setting. And then assumptions about those abilities as well too, that, some of those disabilities they can really be variable. You know, if we're looking at somebody who's struggling with bipolar disorder or even Crohn's disease, there are going to be times where the student is going to maybe be in a place where they're feeling a lot better, things are going really well. And there are also going to be times where things aren't going well at all. And so that can be, I think, sometimes confusing to faculty and staff in terms of that variability. And so then what happens is that we tend to overestimate or underestimate that student's capabilities. And then finally, just thinking about cultural attitudes as well. Some of us may express concerns about perceived fairness of providing the accommodations that might come from our specific cultural background, whether that is a culture from around the world or even a culture of how we were raised or not experiencing people in our lives with invisible or visible disabilities. And again, when we're not taking that into account and not taking time to learn about these things, we're not ensuring that our students are having equal educational opportunities. All right, you can give me to the next slide there, Mark. All right, so looking at the impact of hidden disabilities on academics and thinking a little bit more about what we can do there too. So students that have hidden disabilities are going to be maybe more likely to miss class or lecture or labs. And that might be because they have the frequency of doctor or hospital visits, medical procedures, or illness flare-ups, or even side effects from ongoing medication or trying new medications. You know, I think all of us, invisible or visible disabilities or not, we can think about how hard it is to get into doctor's appointments sometimes and how long those wait lists can be when we're in a lot of pain. And then also, like, if you get a chance to get into an appointment quicker rather than having to wait, right? Like taking all those things into account or getting on new medications and things, like we can all kind of have some empathy there of what that's kind of like for us and why we have to be flexible with maybe some class attendance. Obviously, those sorts of things, missing class can lead students to falling behind. Difficulty concentrating is something that's going to happen frequently. Again, those health conditions are going to affect that, or even the medications that they're taking to help, you know, with the disability is going to make it hard for them to focus for long times during classes. So they might struggle to stay engaged. We might also have some fatigue that comes during classes as well, and that might lead, I mean, that might come from the medications they're on. That might be a product of just kind of what the disability is that they're dealing with. Certainly classes maybe even later in the day sometimes are a bit of a hit the wall period for those students. Sometimes even mornings though can be really, difficult as well too. There's no, you know, real time of day that's better. When we're faculty, we might be thinking about maybe needing to record lectures. Maybe that's going to be an accommodation because, again, students may have trouble being able to focus. And so I think we can all kind of think about times where we've been there too, if we're in a lot of pain or we're in some sort of mental anguish at all, right? Being able to just be really engaged is not always easy, but having that opportunity to have a recording and go back when we're in maybe a better, more comfortable space later on is super helpful. Note-taking assistance is also something that might be impacted. Again, that might come from students needing to be out for absences for medical appointments or not feeling well, or them having trouble concentrating. So if they're able to have note takers or even have shared copies of student lectures, that can be really helpful to make sure that students are able to get the information and process that, you know, even on their own. Reading or assignment accommodations might also be something that is necessary. And thinking about reading assignments, they may just need to be modified or adjusted, or the deadlines just be extended if the disability is causing them some issues with reading. I think about like chronic migraines being, you know, so hard and trying to read, you know, 20 pages of a textbook if you're going through that. Exam accommodations, so they might need some extended time, a distraction, reduced space, or technology assistance on exams too. Thinking about students that I've worked with as well, sometimes they don't know when a flare-up is going to be or when, again, a doctor's appointment is going to come. And so not that that student isn't working really hard and ready to take that exam, but it just might not be the day that they're going to be their best selves to be able to take that exam. Or taking it in a different environment might also be helpful. And then finally, looking at group work challenges, obviously a lot of challenges when we're working with just the individual, but adding more people to that in terms of a group project can be hard to coordinate around chronic health issues and accommodate those limitations too. All right, Mark, I think I'm ready to move
I'm
on. To the next
I'm
one.
going to jump right in real
Sure.
quickly here. You talked about medication and the impacts of medication. Last spring, we kind of had a big issue with lack of ADHD, ADD medication, where a lot of our students, and we saw that in our office, where a lot of students with ADHD couldn't get their ADHD medication. And it really severely impacted them in the classrooms. We had during midterm, we had several students who were juniors and seniors who came to our office who had been straight A students for 3 to 4 years, who are failing their classes and struggling, and it's because of the medication shortage. So they were either they couldn't get their medication, or because they couldn't get their medication, they were put onto another medication, which had an impact on them. But also, when we talk about them missing their medication that was helping them with their symptoms, they were also going through withdrawal symptoms because they had to withdraw from suddenly not having their medication. So they were kind of had that double whammy where they just couldn't function in class. Some of them said like they were like zombies because they were withdrawing, and then they also didn't have their medication. And that medication shortage has gotten better, but it is still impacting some of our students who cannot get their medication. And so because of that medication shortage, pharmacies were only giving that ADHD medication that they got in short supply only to their people, their customers who were their long-term customers and not new customers. So it was really, really hard for students to bounce around and parents to go around and find the medications that they needed. So again, that's another, impact that the students have, and it impacts everything that Betsy was talking about.
Thank you for bringing that up, Mark. That is such an important point, such an unfortunate thing that occurred, but unfortunately a reality of what happens sometimes. And right, the student is doing everything that they can to help with their symptoms, but when there's a medication shortage, there's not a lot that they're able to do. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Yes, okay, this is my right slide. For a second, I thought we weren't there, but we're good. So providing accommodations, we want to do those in a timely, non-discriminatory manner based on that student's request and official accommodation letters, which is going to come from the Center for Accessibility. So those folks are going to be working with the student to determine what are those appropriate accommodations, and then working with faculty as well to disseminate that information and to chat more. So again, those accommodations can include a lot of what we've already been talking about, whether that's extended deadlines, note takers, instruction, note takers or testing accommodations, extended time, all of that. We might look for inclusive teaching strategies as well too, so that, like we talked about, having lecture notes or recordings available, captioning being available on videos, and instructions to follow both verbally and written for the student. Probably an important note here too is to use plain font that's easy to read, no flashing lights or crazy colors. And talking about just like having those notes more readily available, captions on videos, there's not a lot of things that I do feel like are a silver lining to the pandemic, which was a horrible event, right? But I think it has helped us a little bit to be able to provide things in a diverse manner for our students. Allowing flexible attendance and makeup options for students that have this disability-related absences. That's very different than going on a family trip to Florida. There's likely going to be an accommodation in place with the Center for Accessibility already. It's just important that we're not putting our students in a place where they have to disclose ongoing private medical details of what they're off to do today or how that they're feeling, because that might be pretty intrusive and not something that they're needing to share. And then finally, being open-minded. If students might need to stand if they're in some pain, it might also help them pay attention more readily. It's not that they're off task. Standing is helping them to stay on task. They also similarly may need to take some breaks to help kind of keep their mind or their body present in class. And so being open to that. They may also be eating in class. They may need to do that, or they may be on medications that require them to eat during specific times. And so, if we can, just allowing our students to be able to take those breaks and food breaks or take their medication as needed without causing any unwanted attention and calling them out in class. All right. So finally, again, supporting students with hidden disabilities, we can avoid making some of those assumptions about a student and which accommodations they may or may not need based strictly on their appearance. We don't know what's happening underneath the surface. They're not obvious. I've worked with many students that are bright and cheerful, and they're not going to look like they're going through as much as they are, but there's a lot happening beneath the surface. It's also important that we don't require doctor's notes for every absence. Again, getting to work with students, getting those notes can be time consuming and expensive sometimes. There's a lot of back and forth that can happen with those doctor's offices. I think if there isn't an accommodation on file, that is something that we can take note of. And our students then don't have to do all that legwork in between where they could just be focusing on their studies. Don't express skepticism about whether a disability truly impairs a student. I think that one, all of them are really important, but that one really sticks out to me, trusting our students' self-advocacy. I know that there have been students in my office sometimes, right, because they might be outwardly cheerful, happy people who are going through something on the inside in an invisible way that faculty or staff don't readily see. And it can make the students sometimes feel a bit gaslit, or they start questioning themselves of whether or not that I truly need this, am I making this up? I think we have to do kind of a lot of work with that student to revalidate them and asking for what they need so they can be, again, successful at our university. Intervening and stopping disability-related stigmatization or discrimination or harassment that might be occurring. So we're kind of creating a culture in our classrooms where if we're hearing talk that's putting down of any disability during group work presentation or class discussions, we're very aware of that and intervene if necessary. And then finally, I think just as a responsibility of kind of being an upstander in these situations, educating your class about hidden disabilities and building just a culture of understanding and support. And we want to do that campus-wide, of course, but I think looking for opportunities to do that in our class, even starting out with syllabus day, of having something in our syllabus about accommodations and about those sorts of things, or even talking about Center for Accessibility might be an important step in that direction. Okay.
All right, so we talk about the awareness campaign. That's what we've done here to kind of get some campus-wide awareness. We also created a website that talks about hidden disabilities, gives you some more information. So if you go to ndsu.edu disability services / hidden disabilities, you'll find more information on various hidden disabilities, but also what are some of the accommodations that can provide, and what can you do as a classroom teacher who doesn't even know that he or she may have a student with a hidden disability in the classroom. What are some of the things that can happen in that classroom that can accommodate the needs of all students in that classroom? Again, universal design for learning is a great tool, or a great approach to a classroom. Is meeting the needs of all of the students in your classroom, whether they have a disability or not. We'll make sure that you're kind of catching all those students who may have various different needs in your classroom. So this is a site that just went live today, and we'll continuously add information to it. University Relations is also going to be working on a campaign with information on his hidden disabilities also. And with that, we will open it up to some questions. If there's some questions, or if there's some questions that are in the chat.
I don't see any questions yet in the chat, but just a comment that it was very informative. And thank you for providing this really great information. And I just pulled up the webpage as you were saying that, Mark, and this is really great. There's some really, a lot of really great information in here. So I'm excited to see what else you have coming with the campaign and how to better spread this information. Because I know this was kind of the kickoff, the launch of this information.
And if people have information that they would like to have included on this page, we're more than happy to get that information and put that out also. And also be on the lookout on various signage across the university in the next month or next couple of months that give more information on hidden disabilities. And again, we're out there. We really want to make sure that we're supporting students, faculty, and staff who have hidden disabilities and develop a better understanding and becoming a campus that is really welcoming and open to all students.
Absolutely. We do still have a few more minutes. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or unmute yourself. If you're still thinking about what maybe perhaps you want to ask before we do close, I do want to highlight our next Think session that we do have upcoming. So if you want to plop this next one on your calendar, our next Think session is titled Think LGBTQ plus Relationships. We are partnering with our sexual assault prevention and advocacy coordinator, our violence prevention educators, and Canopy Medical Health to provide some really great information on this topic. So the date on that is Thursday, April 11th. It's at 2 p.m. So it's a little bit of a different time. And the session is going to be in person. So that is different from our typical Think sessions that are usually held via Zoom. That is in person in the Badlands room. So we'll send some more information out. An email will be going out. And of course, our social media content will include that information as well. But just wanted to verbally share that today with you as well. Okay, well, I don't see any questions coming in. Betsy, Mark, thank you so much for this great presentation. I found it extremely informative, and I'm looking forward to see what else comes out of this campaign as well. Thank you all for joining, and have an amazing rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.